Hello and welcome to Business Unmuted, a business discussion broadcast live on LinkedIn from Recognition PR's studio and later shared on platforms including YouTube, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. As ever, we're kindly sponsored by Virtue BMW, which is part of Gateshead-based Virtue Motors plc. If you're in the market for a new, used or fleet vehicle, stop by one of the dealerships in Stockton, Durham, Sunderland, Malton or York. Today we're joined in the studio by Howard Little, Member Advisor for the Federation of Small Businesses. Joining us remotely is Tony Stein, Chief Executive of Healthcare Management Solutions, which operates care homes around the UK. Figures released yesterday show that employers added a record 241,000 staff to their payrolls last month, taking the total of payrolled employees to 29 million people. This is above the recorded number in February 2020, just before the UK went into its first lockdown. And that wasn't the only record announced. There was one for vacancies as well. Vacancies reached a new high, surpassing 1 million unfilled roles for the first time since records began in 2001. Records keep coming. This morning, the Office of National Statistics published its inflation report, with rates hitting 3.2% in the year to August, the biggest increase since the modern records began in 1997 and driven by higher food prices. Now, I'm sure many people in businesses will be watching today's cabinet reshuffle with a keen eye. And now we're live in the studio at 5 o'clock at the time I'm speaking. You might be watching a recording later. But at the time we're live, Robert Buckland, Robert Jenrick, Gavin Williamson have all left the cabinet. Michael Gove has moved to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and he's going to be in charge of levelling up. And Liz Truss has been promoted to Foreign Secretary. From my point of view, it looks like Rishi Sunak is staying as Chancellor, which is a good thing. Let's see what our guests have to say. Welcome, Howard. Welcome, hello. Tony. Tony, what do you think of Rishi staying as Chancellor and the moves you know about so far?
I suppose overall, I've not been too unhappy with the government's actions so far. I have a very selfish view of the world, if you can imagine, being immersed in social care sector for the last 20 years. We have been promised some serious reforms in social care for a very, very long time. And I have got huge hopes that this government may do something to address those problems that we've got. We'll probably talk about this, but obviously the increase in national insurance came about, and I think there's long overdue some more money into health and social care. But my worry here is what happens to that money and how it finds its way to the front line. And I've got some serious concerns about that, it has to be said.
Okay, we'll drill down.
As for a cabinet reshuffle, I think it's a good reshuffle so far.
Okay, well, we'll drill down to that in a minute. By the way, if you're watching in the northeastern Yorkshire area, of course, the Chancellor is a Yorkshire MP. And I'd just watch out. I have a feeling, I might be wrong, and if you're watching or recording this, you'll see if I'm right or wrong. I have a feeling that in the next couple of days, Simon Clarke, MP for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, might enter the government. I hope he will. He's a good, talented guy. And Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who's already in the government, MP for Berwick, she may get a promotion. Let's see what happens anyway. We're still speculating. It's live. Let's get to Tony's substantive point, though. Last week we had the announcement of the national insurance rise. It wasn't just national insurance, though, was it? It was a pain spread among employers, employees, directors, shareholders, and older workers, so that there wasn't an age difference in who gets the charge. Now, we'll talk about how the charge is spent in a minute, but what did you think about the principle of using tax to raise money for health and social care rather than going to an insurance-based system?
Oh, well, my view has always been that as a country we should adopt a specific view of social care in the same way that we've adopted a view around healthcare, which is there are certain needs that as a first world country and a civilized society we should meet, and social care needs are in that whole raft of things that we should be looking to deal with. But the issue is we don't have enough money to do that unless we raise taxes, and I'm quite happy with taxes being raised. I wish in a way that we'd been straightforward about this and raised income tax rather than national insurance for lots of different reasons. And my worry is that the money it needs to be ring fenced, but in a way that ensures that the full benefit of that gets to health and social care. And the way that social care is funded in this country doesn't lend itself easily to that.
It's
So if you think
hugely
about
complex,
the
isn't it? A
NHS,
man in the street can't understand it.
well, the NHS is funded by central government, but social care is funded through the local authorities. Many local authorities are really struggling to meet the demands placed upon them. And what I fear is going to happen is the additional cash will be pushed out through local authorities who will simply dial back on what they were spending in social care before, with the new money filling that gap and using the money elsewhere. So I just think it's not really how it's going to work. It's good in intent, but not necessarily going to be good in practice.
Okay, so we hope that it can work, but it is complex. Let's talk about the principle of the cost, because although you deliver at the sharp end, your members, Howard, are going to have to pay for it before he gets it. What was your view on the tax and the way in which the government introduced the charges?
I think it's a bit of a hurdle for small businesses, just another thing that they have to find the money for, and at the moment they're struggling on a number of different levels, and there's no, some things have been stopped, and this is now coming in as another, not say levy, but like I said, it's an increase in tax, and not only do the small business owners have to find that money, their employees have to find it as well, and like Tony just said, it's the journey that money's going to go on to get to the end product. I don't think anybody minds paying that little bit extra, for hopefully our own futures, because we could all end up in that position of needing that money. But it's the journey and making sure it gets to where it's supposed to be.
I understand that point of view from businesses. They feel pressed upon when it comes to raising money, and yes, the care dimension of it makes it worthwhile and lets the general public feel a little bit better about it. Do you think that the way the business, your members are at the moment, as we emerge at the end of September from the pandemic conditions, the government is taking the right pace of removing the things like business rates, furlough, and the VAT cuts? It's been done gradually, but is it too gradual or is it too fast?
I think, as far as, in my opinion, a lot of the small businesses are struggling at the moment. Some of them haven't. Some of them have done really well during this pandemic, and they're a bit shy about admitting to that. But, there's an awful lot who are struggling, and it just seems, when we're hoping for help and, to get through this and to come out of this in a good place, that this is just another knockback. And like I said, although I think if you talk to people personally, they're not that bothered about it, but at the moment it's just some more money they've got to find to pay this extra national insurance.
Okay, now Tony, both you and Howard's members also have similar pressures upon you when it comes to finding staff, paying staff, and the fact that we heard inflation is going up. Let's talk about it in your specific area first, Tony, and then Howard in more general sense. Tony, what are the specific pressures you're finding as far as recruitment is concerned?
This is possibly, I know we're all shroud wavers at times, but this is the worst time I've ever known for recruitment in our sector. And we've got some real specific problems. I mean, in addition to us having the usual problems of recruiting people into social care, which isn't for everybody, we've got a number of major factors that influence that. One is, it's still a minimum wage occupation largely, and I think that we send a very powerful message to people when we pay the minimum wage that they're not valued, and I think that has a real impact in our sector. I think we're suffering a lot of burnout at the moment. The people who work in our care homes, I can tell you now, last year was a nightmare for them. They had to really knuckle down. It's a difficult job anyway, but obviously they were all covering for each other, people going off when they were testing positive, people going off when they were sick. We couldn't bring people into the homes, so people were working extra shifts. It was a really tough year last year. And then when we thought we were coming out of it in January, it got worse with the second wave, and they've had a real battering. And then I think that the government in Scotland particularly through the implementation of their police investigations into COVID deaths, did nothing but absolutely kill the spirit of those people who went through that nightmare journey of COVID last year. And then the CQC published their stupid list of homes that had COVID deaths, and their table of those where of homes that had deaths in the care homes. So again, it makes people feel guilty, that they were in some way responsible for the deaths in the care homes. And again, who would want to work a minimum wage job and have all of that pressure and guilt and stress pushed onto them? So I think that doesn't help. We then had mandatory vaccinations in the sector, which has had a major impact on us. We're going to lose about 4 or 5% of our workforce come the 11th of November.
This is because you will have to sack them because they won't have the vaccine.
They won't have the vaccine. And to be fair, I have a lot of sympathy with that. As a matter of principle, I think forcing people to be vaccinated is a pretty significant step as a matter of principle. And we were working very hard with people to encourage the take-up of vaccine, and it was working. It was a slow process, but it was working. But the fact that they've accelerated it through the mandatory vaccine program means that we're now having to effectively make a cut of the 11th of November, and anybody who's not vaccinated we can't employ. So again, a big issue. And then you've got the general problems around the country, which I'm sure Howard will speak to. I'm struggling to understand why we've got such a shortage of workers around across all sectors, across all industries. People talk about lorry drivers, but actually, supermarket workers, builders, vets, you name it, you can't find people at the moment.
It's very interesting.
And that's putting real pressure on us as well. So, and that can't be Brexit, by the way, because if you look across the pond at America have got 10.1 million vacancies at the moment, which on a pro rata basis is worse than we are.
Yeah, and it's also the same with HGV drivers in France and so on. But so you don't necessarily agree with the Chambers of Commerce as saying that the government should act quickly by approving temporary visas for roles in the worst affected sectors. Maybe they should.
In fairness, all that's going to do is it's going to mean that we can fish in another pond, but that pond also has the same problems. So it's just spreading the issue out. If we were saying that they didn't have this problem in Europe, and that the issue of us leaving the EU was the root of this, then fair enough. But actually, the problem is endemic across all of Europe, so it's not going to help. I'm not quite sure what the problem is. Part of us, I think, in our sector are hoping that when the furlough ends at the end of September, then people will start to flow back into the workforce and fill some of these gaps. Maybe that's the answer, but I'm not so optimistic.
Well, Tony, that's a helpful insight. It's depressing, unfortunately. And I know there's a big TV drama on, I think it's Channel 4 coming up, which is being trailed every time you watch the television, which paints a depressing picture as well. It doesn't help. Howard, let's talk about the more general situation of labour shortages. From the point of view of the economy, it shows it's strong. So that's the positive. But what are your members seeing? Is it driving labour costs up as well?
Well, they're struggling to get, not everyone, but a lot of people are struggling to get not just staff, but the right skilled staff. I mean, that's been ongoing for a number of years, a skill shortage. But this has just seemed to be bringing it to a real head. And, a lot of them are doing without the staff, trying to do the jobs themselves, and working almost 2 jobs within the same business, which is, has a knock-on effect to their mental health and everything else. So it runs all the way down the line. And just going back to the HGV thing, I saw something just the other day about them changing the rules about driving exams, driving tests, where they don't have to do the reversing, and I'm thinking, that's probably not a good idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't want to compromise on safety. But there are some log jams in the documentation. That should be dealt with presumably quickly. Yeah,
I think there's also talk about allowing bus drivers, single-decker and double-decker bus drivers, to convert straight to HGV2 without a test. But that will, if they move to driving the HGV lorries, then who's going to be driving the buses?
Yeah. So it shifts one problem to another. Let's talk about inflation. I'll come to you in a minute, Tony, because I know that costs are very important in your game. I had to sign a new contract for a supplier the other day, and the supplier insisted that for the next 3 years there is a 6% growth in the price every year on the anniversary. I also signed a contract for my new mobile phone the other day, and it was inflation plus 3.9%. And a contract for a landline from, I think it was BT, to be fair, it was BT, inflation plus 3.9%. It's as if Ofcom, the regulator, is allowing these price rises. Same with energy, the price cap is being allowed up. So some of these staple costs and regulated costs are being allowed to rise by the government. What's your view on that?
Why?
Yeah.
Why is it being allowed to happen? You know, like you say, you've got all these caps in place to keep these things at a reasonable level. But you did say you actually signed the contracts because you've got no choice, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to tell people what the contract was for, but it was for a service I needed and therefore I had to do.
So you've got no option but to take that on.
Absolutely.
And we'll all be in the same boat.
So I'm going to ask you both a bigger question related to inflation. It is a harder question, really. Should the Bank of England grit its teeth and put interest rates up sometime before Christmas to send a signal both to the government and the politicians that may want to inflate their debt away, and to the wider markets, people selling houses and so on, that actually we have to get inflation checked?
Well, I think you get two answers there, won't you? It'll be yes or no. If people have got money in savings, they'll be saying yes, put it up, and if people are borrowing, they'll be saying no, keep it low.
In my opinion,
yeah.
I think they probably should, personally, but that's a personal view. Tony, what do you think?
Well, what I can absolutely assure you is that if interest rates are increased, there will be business failures in our sector without a shadow of a doubt. Because although I think the governments have been exceptional in the support that they've given throughout the COVID pandemic so far, there are a lot of companies out there that I would describe as walking wounded. You know, the pressures that people don't see are, for example, in our sector, the inflation for insurance for people operating care homes has been absolutely breathtaking this last year. I mean, I'm talking 100% increases in premiums, and at the same time, they're not giving you the same cover. It's been absolutely terrifying, and the argument, I can't understand this. The argument by the insurers in that particular instance was that actually it's to cover them for all the losses that they're going to get because of coronavirus. But actually, when you ask them, they've not had any claims as a result of coronavirus.
That sounds like really COVID gouging.
Yeah.
Due to COVID, that phrase "due to COVID," you get excuses all the time. So due to COVID. And what about? I mean, this is you've said what you said about losses in the sector or danger to the sector, but you know, you have a sector that, as I understand it, I know it quite well, operates on fixed costs. You know, you do contracts with local authorities, and you can't go in the middle of the financial year putting them up, and they're always inflation linked. So you, in the middle of your year, have a higher energy bill, or if you have higher food costs and pressure on wages, surely the Bank of England getting stuck in to control inflation is the better of two evils.
Yeah, I think so. I think you've actually got two distinct parts to our sector. You've got those who supply the private part of the market, and you've got those who supply the local authority funded part of the market for social care. Those who are supplying the private part of the market, they can inflate their fees by whatever they choose. You know, so they could, if their inflation rates run at 6%, then they put fees up by 6%. We're reliant on the local authority fees, and the local authority fees have been averaging increases of around 2.5–3.5% roughly over the last few years, depending on which local authority area you're in. So, you know, when we're seeing payroll inflation, you know, as we're seeing, and that's been horrendous, by the way. It's not just minimum wage increases. We're having to put them way beyond minimum wage to recruit. Nurse pays obviously going up, but again, not just the 3% the government are offering in our sector. We're having to pay a lot more than that to attract nurses because they're in short supply. So, you know, I think the margins are getting squeezed tighter and tighter. My point is that those businesses that have been struggling for years, where the margins have been squeezed every single year and have got debt, And if that debt starts to cost them more, then I think that could be the death knell to a lot of our businesses out there, you know, a lot of care home businesses. So I think the government's got to be treading a very careful line on this. If that money that is being raised through national insurance finds its way through into social care, and that does work its way into properly funded care, then actually we may survive. But if we don't, and we see interest rates rise, then there will be business failures without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, point well made. Howard, now I know you've not got a view from the Federation of Small Business. What's your personal view? If you were actually on the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee, and I would vote for a small 0.25 or 0.5% rise in interest rates now. How would you vote?
Well, I think it's been really, really low for such a long time. And I mean, let's face it, it can't get any lower, really. So an awful lot of people who have got money in savings and they have had no benefit of it at all. So yeah, maybe it is about time it was just maybe lifted a little bit.
I hear that sentiment a lot these days. I think it will end up being lifted soon, but there we are. Well, look, gents, thank you for a stimulating conversation. I do appreciate Howard, you coming in and sparing me the time, Tony. Keep up the good work. It's unsung work, the work of people who run these care homes, and hopefully the change that was made last week will filter down to you. Fingers crossed. Thank you both very much. Join us for another episode of Business Unmuted, 5 o'clock next Wednesday.